and it means the immediate end to the war itself, not just Gaza.
US President Donald Trump gave Hamas 3 to 4 days on Tuesday to accept a US-backed peace plan for Gaza. And he warned of, quote, a very sad end if the group rejected the proposal, which he said was close to ending the 2-year-old conflict. Mediators Qatar and Egypt shared the 20-point plan with Hamas, which was not involved in negotiations, late on Monday. That was after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had appeared alongside Trump at the White House and endorsed the document.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims.
An official briefed on the talks told Reuters Hamas would review the proposal, quote, in good faith and provide a response. However, it calls on the Islamist militant group to disarm, which it has previously rejected. Many elements of the latest plan have been included in numerous ceasefire deals proposed over the last 2 years, including those accepted and then subsequently rejected by both Israel and Hamas. It envisions a ceasefire followed by the release within 72 hours of all remaining hostages, in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces. It points to a vague path towards Palestinian statehood, which Netanyahu has vowed never to let happen, but only once Gaza's redevelopment is well underway and the Palestinian Authority undertakes reforms. Oversight would fall to an International Board of Peace chaired by Trump, and including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, according to the White House. A Palestinian official who did not want to be named said the proposal meant the full adoption of all Israeli conditions, quote, which do not grant the Palestinian people or the residents of the Gaza Strip any legitimate rights. Many in Gaza felt the same, like displaced Palestinian Nabil Awad.
This delegates all of the rights of the Palestinian people. It ends the Palestinian cause and at the same time will end the Palestinian population, or what's left of it.
Israel's military campaign in Gaza has killed more than 66,000 Palestinians, according to local health authorities, and displaced nearly everyone. The country has been accused by a UN Commission of Inquiry of committing genocide, which it denies. The war was sparked when Hamas attacked southern Israeli communities, killing more than 1,200 people, Israeli tallies say, and taking more than 250 hostages.
Italy has said it will stop tracking an international flotilla attempting to deliver aid to Gaza with a military vessel, as activists on board announced they were on high alert as they move close to their destination. The global Sumud flotilla, consisting of more than 40 civilian boats with over 500 people, including parliamentarians, lawyers, and Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg, aims to break Israel's blockade of Gaza. Once the convoy got within 150 nautical miles of Gaza's shoreline, the Italian frigate accompanying was set to stop, the Italian Defense Ministry said in a statement, adding that it expected it to happen at around midnight UK time. Italy has urged flotilla members to accept a compromise proposal to drop aid in a Cyprus port and avoid a confrontation with Israeli forces. Flotilla representatives have refused the offer. We say again, the flotilla sails onwards. The Italian Navy will not derail this mission. The humanitarian demand to break the blockade cannot be walked back to port, the global Sumud flotilla said in a statement. Italy and Spain deployed Navy vessels last week to assist the flotilla after it was hit by drones armed with stun grenades and irritants in international waters off Greece, but without any intention to engage militarily. The Israeli government did not respond to accusations from activists on board the flotilla who said that it was behind last week's attacks, but it has vowed to use any means to prevent the boats from reaching Gaza, arguing that its blockade is legal as part of its war against Hamas militants. Sir Keir Starmer wants to change how international law is interpreted, to stop unsuccessful asylum seekers blocking their deportation on the grounds they could be sent to worse prisons or healthcare systems. The Prime Minister told the BBC he did not want to tear down human rights laws, but is ready to look again at Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects against torture and degrading treatment. The Prime Minister said mass migration in recent years meant there needed to be a change, but those genuinely fleeing persecution should still be given asylum. His comments came after his Home Secretary set out plans to tighten rules for migrants seeking indefinite leave to remain. On the issue of deportation, he was asked by Radio 4's Today program about the example of a Brazilian pedophile who successfully claimed he would be treated worse in a Brazilian prison than he would in a British prison. Sir Keir said there was a difference between deporting someone to summary execution and sending them to somewhere with a different level of healthcare or prison conditions. He added, "We need to look again at the interpretation of a wide range of international laws by UK courts."
I do think we need to look again at the interpretation of some of these provisions. And we've already begun to do that work, Nick, in some of our domestic legislation. We do need to look at that.
So that's what's called Article 3, isn't it?
It's Article 3 or Article 8. They're the two that are most immediately in play. But it's more than that. It's the refugee conventions, it's the torture conventions, it's Convention on the Rights of the Children. I'm not going to tear all that down. I believe in those instruments. I believe in the rule of law, and I think they matter. But all international instruments, and this is long established, have to be applied in the circumstances as they are now. We're seeing mass migration in a way that we haven't seen in previous years. So I believe that those genuinely fleeing persecution should be afforded asylum, and that is a compassionate act. But I equally think we need to look again at the interpretation of some of these provisions. And I think there's a difference between someone being deported to summary execution and someone who is simply going somewhere where they don't have the same level of healthcare, or for that matter, the same prison conditions. And therefore I do think we should look at issues like that again. I think there's quite an appetite to look at issues like that again. But what I don't think is right is to pull these instruments down, not least because very many other countries would then not do deals like return deals with us or law enforcement deals with us, and therefore it'd be completely self-defeating.
The Labour Party conference in Liverpool has just concluded, with government ministers facing two ways on Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Labour had little choice but to use the conference to make its best case against reform, given that Farage has eclipsed the Tory party as the looming electoral threat to Labour. And in his keynote speech to conference, Prime Minister Keir Starmer called out Nigel Farage as a racist, highlighting Reform's plans for mass deportations of migrants. Starmer's defence of multiculturalism was one of the best received parts of his speech, cheered to the echo by delegates. But the fault line in Starmer's strategy for dealing with reform was instantly visible when government ministers in the conference front rows were pictured waving St George's Cross flags that they had been specially provided for in order to demonstrate their patriotism. This, of course, the visual language of the populist right, used extensively in the recent Fly the Flag campaign and by Tommy Robinson supporters as they rampaged through central London recently. The fault line, however, runs deeper than mere iconography. In substantive policy terms, Starmer has shifted Labour so that it mimics Farage's hostility to immigrants. He left it to the new hardline Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, to unveil the details. But when she did, they were punitive. Labour will demand that immigrants speak English to a high level, a bar which even some white British-born citizens might find hard to clear. Then immigrants would need to earn £10,000 a year above the national average, never claim sickness or unemployment benefits, and do voluntary work. And all this for a decade rather than the current 5 years before they become citizens. It's a policy every bit as discriminatory as Farage's policy, and it demonises immigrants as second-class citizens. As such, it's likely to feed reform, since voters inclined to support this kind of discrimination are unlikely to be deterred from adopting Farage's full-throated racism by Starmer's adoption of this approach. With Rachel Reeves about to hammer the core of working population with tax rises, discontent with Starmer and his government is unlikely to recover in the polls before next May's local elections.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth slammed fat generals and diversity initiatives that he said led to decades of decay in the military, and told a rare gathering of commanders yesterday they should resign if they don't support his agenda.
And see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And that's why today, at my direction, the era of unprofessional appearance is over.
Addressing a room full of America's top generals and admirals, summoned from around the world without explanation last week, Hegseth defended his firings of flag officers, which include the top U.S. general, who was black, and the Navy's top admiral, who was a woman. He said the officers he relieved were part of a broken culture. He promised sweeping changes to how discrimination complaints are handled and how accusations of wrongdoing are investigated at the Pentagon, saying the current system has top brass walking on eggshells. Hegseth criticized the look of overweight troops, saying, "It's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon." He said all fitness tests would be set to male benchmarks only and emphasized the importance of grooming standards.
Then you should do the honorable thing and resign. We would thank you for your service. But I suspect, I know, the overwhelming majority of you feel the opposite. These words make your hearts full. You love the War Department because you love what you do, the profession of arms. You are hereby liberated to be an apolitical, hard-charging, no-nonsense, constitutional leader that you joined the military to be. We are preparing every day. We have to be prepared for war.
The Pentagon has undergone 8 months of blistering changes since Trump took office, including firings, banning books from academy libraries, and ordering lethal strikes on suspected drug boats off Venezuela. Earlier this month, Trump signed an executive order to rename the Department of Defense the Department of War, reverting to a title it held until after World War II, when officials sought to emphasize the Pentagon's role in preventing conflict. Military leaders attending the gathering will be under public scrutiny for any reaction to overtly political comments made by Trump, who has often dragged the military into political issues. The U.S. military is meant to be apolitical, loyal to the U.S. Constitution, and independent of any party or political movement.
A region-wide strike rocked Kashmir amid a communications blackout this week. The strike was announced last week after government negotiations remained deadlocked over the abolition of elite privileges and seats reserved for the Pakistani-based refugees from Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The strike, called by the Jammu-Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee, or JKJAAC, over the issue of its unfulfilled charter of demands, saw rival groups stage simultaneous protests which accused each other of fomenting violence. During an otherwise peaceful demonstration, at least one person was killed and over a dozen others were injured, including a policeman in the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or AJK, capital on Monday. According to an eyewitness, the counter-rally was protected by police and paramilitary troops. Police lobbed tear gas shells on the JKJAAC demonstrators and fired at them. People at the hospital showed spent bullet casings, which they said they had collected from the ground while trying to rescue injured people. Mobile and internet services have remained suspended in AJK since midday last Sunday, and it seems the curbs could continue.
The U.S. government shut down much of its operations on Wednesday as deep partisan divisions prevented Congress and the White House from reaching a funding deal. That sets off what could be a long, grueling standoff that could lead to the loss of thousands of federal jobs. The 15th government shutdown since 1981 commenced hours after the Senate rejected a short-term spending measure that would have kept government operations afloat through November 21st. Democrats opposed the legislation due to Republicans' refusal to attach an extension of health benefits for millions of Americans that are due to expire at the end of the year. Republicans say the issue must be addressed separately. There was no clear path out of the impasse, which agencies warned would halt the release of a closely watched September employment report, slow air travel, suspend scientific research, and withhold pay from U.S. troops. It will also lead to the furlough of 750,000 federal workers at a daily cost of $400 million. Democrats are under pressure from their frustrated supporters to score a rare victory ahead of the 2026 midterm elections that will determine control of Congress for the final 2 years of Trump's term. The healthcare push has given them a chance to unite behind an issue that resonates with voters. Along with the extended health subsidies, Democrats have also sought to ensure that Trump will not be able to undo those changes if they are signed into law.
I don't know, we'll probably have a shutdown.
Trump has refused to spend billions of dollars approved by Congress, prompting some Democrats to question why they should vote for any spending legislation at all. Independent analysts warn the shutdown could last longer than the budget-related closures of the past. Trump and White House officials have threatened to punish Democrats with cuts to government programs and the federal payroll. Last week, Trump's budget director threatened permanent layoffs in the event of a shutdown.
In Madagascar's capital, Steve Razafindrainibe prepares to leave home on Tuesday morning, knowing he will soon stand among thousands. The PhD student was among many who took to the streets that day to protest against the government. Security forces fired tear gas to disperse hundreds of young protesters in Antananarivo on Tuesday. The unrest, which began last week, continued as protesters denounced the government over persistent power and water shortages. The demonstrations are the biggest unrest since Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina's 2023 re-election. On Monday, he tried to ease tensions by dissolving the government and promising to support businesses hit by looting, saying he wanted to open talks with young people. But for many, including Razafindrainibe, that wasn't enough.
I'm fed up, and so are all the Malagasy people, with power cuts, water cuts, and above all, the confiscation of rights and power in the hands of a certain population. I think that as citizens, we have a duty to demonstrate.
In a message on the protest movement's Facebook page, organizers voiced disappointment, demanding apologies from the president and the dismissed prime minister, and the firing of Antananarivo's administrator. The United Nations says the protests have left at least 22 dead and more than 100 injured. Those figures were rejected by the Foreign Ministry, which said they lacked official sources and were based on rumors or misinformation. But for Razafindrainibe, his vision for Madagascar extends beyond immediate relief from utility failures.
Changing the system means setting up truly democratic institutions, not institutions that are used as a tool of repression and domination. We're looking for a Malagasy democratic value system, and that's the objective that drives us.
A government spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday's protests.
In the Middle East's least electrified country, solar energy is now bringing a ray of hope. The Aden solar power plant is supplying hundreds of thousands of homes in a country that has been grappling with an electricity crisis for 3 decades. Yemen's lack of fuel has caused long-term shortages, along with a war that has severely damaged the national power infrastructure. The 120-megawatt renewable power plant, funded by the UAE, has brought relief to the southern city of Aden, home to Yemen's internationally recognized government. Project technician Adib Shamlan said it has supplied between 150,000 and 170,000 homes daily since 2024.
Aden suffers from a chronic electricity problem, which is a cumulative issue. What Aden is currently experiencing is an extraordinary expansion in construction and development. This must be accompanied by an expansion of the infrastructure, with electricity being the main pillar and the key factor for any promising economic breakthrough in the country. Thankfully, there is now very positive and tangible progress, especially in daytime generation capacity. This is very noticeable, and God willing, the situation will be better in the coming days.
The city's businesses have previously suffered losses, particularly when the intense summer heat hits. Market owner Mubarak Kaid said power outages would damage goods like meat and ice cream, leaving him and other traders out of pocket. Now, he said, having both generators and solar energy keeps products permanently refrigerated. The International Energy Agency said solar power represented only 10.4% of Yemen's total electricity generation in 2023. But this is expected to rise, with a second phase of the Aden solar power plant planned for 2026 to double its capacity.
Igniters initiate NASA will send 4 astronauts on a 10-day voyage around the Moon in 2026, the latest step in a mission to land humans on the lunar surface for the first time in more than 5 decades.
We rise together, back to the Moon and beyond.
But the current Artemis program has different goals and methods to the Apollo landings of the 60s and 70s, involving moon bases and missions to Mars.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Artemis, named after the twin sister to Apollo, was spawned by US President Donald Trump's first presidency. There are also other plans to land humans on the Moon. Most notably, China, which has in recent years invested heavily in its space program, wants to achieve the feat by 2030. But at present, Artemis is likely to be first. It's a series of missions including Artemis 3, which currently expects to return humans to the Moon in 2027, though space analysts expect that date to slip. The plan is to land astronauts at the lunar South Pole, a place where humans have never previously set foot. The choice of location is significant, says Dr. Laurie Glaze, the acting administrator of NASA's Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate, which oversees Artemis.
That's a place that, as we explore, we may be able to find resources like frozen water that could be used in place. We could turn that frozen ice into liquid water for drinking and then convert it and split it into oxygen and hydrogen for breathing and for fuel.
And that would be significant, she said, for establishing a longer-term NASA presence on the Moon. In addition to scientific discovery and exploration, that longer-term presence is part of another goal, as humans take further steps into our solar system.
And that's going to prepare us to send astronauts to Mars.
One of the companies working with NASA on Artemis is Firefly Aerospace. In February, it became the second US company to land on the Moon, using its Blue Ghost lander propelled by a SpaceX rocket. Firefly CEO Jason Kim.
The gravity on the Moon is, much lighter than on Earth, and because of that, taking things and taking off of the Moon's surface and taking resources to Mars is actually more straightforward than doing it from Earth.
The involvement of commercial partners such as Firefly is one way, Glaze said, in which Artemis differs from Apollo. But she also sees a commercial future for the Moon's surface through what she described as a lunar economy.
So we very well could see commercial activities going on at the Moon with other companies visiting on a routine basis.
The Interloon harvesting system involves...
One business hoping to profit is Interloon. It wants to extract helium-3 from the lunar regolith, the loose layer of rocks and debris on the Moon's surface. Helium-3 has a variety of uses on Earth, including in national security, healthcare, and quantum computing. It's rare on Earth, but abundant on the Moon, says co-founder and CEO Rob Meyerson.
Helium-3 sells for $20 million a kilogram. So it is the only resource in the universe that is priced high enough to warrant going to space and bringing it back to Earth today.
Meyerson said Interloon's method is mindful of protecting the lunar surface, and that the regolith is replaced so that what is left looks like a tilled field. Asked about a private company profiting from what is seen as a global asset, he said Interloon would never claim any part of the Moon as its own, and that it was serving customers in important areas. According to a report from the NASA Office of Inspector General, the Artemis program was expected to cost $93 billion from 2012 through to 2025. However, cuts proposed to the NASA budget by the Trump administration would axe key parts of the program. Glaze said NASA has suppliers across the US and that the funding for the Artemis program is invested in every state.
So we are generating jobs, and for every dollar that we spend on this hardware, $3 comes back into the US Treasury.
Glaze says the Moon could look like a very different place in the next 50 to 100 years, citing the commercial activities there and the sustained NASA presence. Meyerson said the reusability of rockets, such as SpaceX's Falcon 9, has been a key step in lowering the cost of access to space. What's next, he predicts, is building things in space using resources sourced in space, removing the need to launch materials from Earth.
Then you can start to think about really long-term practical things, building out giant space stations where people live that have, that rotate to simulate gravity. building, once you have fusion reactors on Earth, you can start to think about building direct fusion drive propulsion that gets us between the Earth and Mars in 30 days instead of 30 to 60 days instead of 6 to 7 months.
However, such plans raise ethical questions, says Dr. David Jeevan-Drampillai, a lecturer in social anthropology at the University of Manchester who specialises in outer space.
So if you're building infrastructure on the moon, if you're taking the moon's resources, is that enabling a transition of resources to the wealthy? Is it enabling a transition of moon territory and sovereignty and the moon as a cultural object to the few?
Almost every culture, Jeevan-Drampillai said, has some form of moon myth or relationship with the moon. Therefore, he argued, such space programs should feature more international dialogue around their cultural implications. What if one person's future building, he asked, is another person's denigration of a sacred space?